Today, we're going to dive into an economic idea that is so powerful, it kicked off in a struggling English town and ballooned into one of the biggest food brands on the planet. This is the story of how regular people decided to take their power back.
But first, let me ask you something. What if, instead of just buying from a company, you actually owned a piece of it? I'm not talking about being a shareholder, but a member. What if the profits from your morning coffee or that carton of milk went straight back into your community, or maybe even your own wallet? Just keep that thought in your head.
So to really get this whole thing, we've got to jump in a time machine and go way back to the Industrial Revolution. Now, it was a time of amazing invention, for sure. But for the average worker, life was anything but glamorous.
I mean, this was the brutal reality for millions. People were facing these insane conditions. Endless hours in the factories, wages that barely paid for food, and zero, and I mean zero, say in their own economic destiny. They were basically just cogs in a machine designed to squeeze every last drop of value out of them.
So what do, right? When the entire system feels like it's rigged against you, where do you even start to push back? This very question led to a pretty radical answer. If you can't beat the system, build a new one.
And that brings us to the blueprint. See, it wasn't enough to just have a cool idea. Someone had to create a practical, repeatable model that actually worked, kind of like an operating system for economic fairness.
So meet the Rochdale Pioneers. Picture this, it's 1844. A group of 28 weavers and artisans in Rochdale, England, are just fed up. They're tired of getting ripped off. So they pool what little money they have to open their own store, selling basic food items they couldn't afford otherwise. But what made them legendary wasn't the store itself, it was the rules they wrote down for running it. And their genius was all in these principles they came up with. The goal was never to make a few founders rich, no way. It was about creating a system that served the community. The two most game-changing ideas here were democratic control, meaning every member got one vote, didn't matter how much money you put in, and how they dealt with profits. Any extra money, the surplus, was handed back to the members based on how much they used the store. So the more you participated, the more you benefited. It turned a simple shop into a powerhouse for self-help.
You know, an idea this good is not going to stay in one little town for long. The Rochdale blueprint was so effective that it just started spreading like wildfire across Europe, and different regions started tweaking it to solve their own unique problems.
And this shows that adaptability perfectly. Over in Britain, it was all about consumer co-ops, sticking to the original script. But then in Germany, they used the model to create cooperative banks, giving farmers and small businesses a fair shot at getting credit. And then you look at Scandinavia, where farmers banded together to create producer co-ops, especially in dairy, which gave them the collective muscle to actually compete in the marketplace.
Okay, so now let's jump halfway across the world to India and see how this idea took root there. In India, farmers were facing a different kind of monster, but one that was just as devastating, the crushing cycle of debt.
I mean, the choice was just night and day. You could go to the local moneylender and get slammed with these insane interest rates that pretty much guaranteed you'd be poor forever. Or you could join a cooperative. This was a real path forward, with fair credit, democratic control, and a piece of the profits. It was, quite literally, a lifeline.
This wasn't some small fringe movement. It became so critical that in 1904, the government itself stepped in and formally adopted the model, passing an act based directly on those German credit co-ops we just talked about. The cooperative movement now had official backing in India, and that set the stage for something huge. And that brings us to what is, honestly, the ultimate proof of this model's power, the Amul Revolution. This is the incredible story of how millions of small, rural farmers took on a powerful monopoly and built a massive empire, all with milk. The spark really came in 1946. Farmers in the Kheda district of Gujarat were getting totally exploited by middlemen and this one private dairy. So they went to the influential leader Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, and his advice was incredibly simple and direct. Cut out the middlemen, own the whole system yourselves. And that's exactly what they did. They formed their own cooperative. A few years later, this brilliant young engineer, Dr. Verghese Kurian, shows up and starts to professionalize and modernize the whole operation. And the model was so wildly successful that by 1970, it became the foundation for Operation Flood, a nationwide program that would completely transform India's entire dairy industry. And the results? Just look at that number, 3.6 million. Today, Amul isn't owned by some big corporation or a single wealthy family. It's owned by 3.6 million farmer members. That is cooperation on a scale that is just mind-blowing. And here is the most crucial point. Every single time you buy an Amul product, that profit doesn't go to some distant, faceless shareholder. It flows right back to the millions of men and women who get up every single day to milk the cows. The system is built for them.
But okay, that brings us to today. Is this idea, born in the 19th century out of industrial misery? Is it even relevant anymore in our super connected digital world? Well, the answer is it's complicated.
On the one hand, a lot of co-ops today are really held back by some serious challenges. Things like political interference, bad management, and just a resistance to modernizing. But on the other hand, the opportunities are just massive. I mean, imagine integrating modern agri-tech, creating digital platforms for members, and getting a new generation excited to drive community-led growth. The original blueprint is still incredibly powerful.
So let's pull it all together. From one tiny store in Rochdale, an idea was born. A business that's owned and run by its members, designed to fight exploitation. That idea, built on a simple set of rules, grew into a global movement, creating giants like Amul. This whole story just goes to show that when people work together, they can build something powerful enough to change the entire system. Which leaves us with one final thought to chew on. In this age of the gig economy, platform monopolies, and digital spaces where so many of us, creators, users, workers, often feel powerless, maybe the most revolutionary innovation we need isn't some new piece of tech. Maybe it's a very, very old idea: cooperation.